Let's start talking about the imaginary unit. What the I does, the imaginary number does, is allow us to take the square root of a negative number. There are some real quick, easy rules to figure out operations when you're using I. For the most part, you're going to treat it exactly like you would any other variable, but there are some rules here depending on what exponent it has. Let's start at the beginning and see if we figure out a pattern. Oh, wait, hold on. This is the definition of I. What it says is I squared equals -1. That's the definition. That's where this comes from. From there, we can say I is equal to the square root of -1. So these are basically one and the same. Let's see if we see a pattern when we're working with these i's. I to the 0 power. Well, anything to the 0 power is 1. Okay. Now let's look at I to the first power. Well, anything to the first power is that same number. Now we have I squared is equal to, and by definition we know that I squared is equal to -1. Here's where we can go ahead and start doing a little bit of math to find our values. I to the third power can be written as I squared times I. Earlier, I just did I squared, and I squared right there is the same as -1. So I have -1 times I, which means that this I cubed, I to the third power, is equal to -I. Again, we took this negative, we have I to the second power times I, that's the same as I to the third, and just like you would normal variables, add the exponents. I squared times I is the same as -1 times I, because I squared is -1. Then we can change this piece right here. We have I to the fourth. This is the same as having I to the third, and then we're going to multiply it again by I. From above, we see that we have I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. I to the third is the same as -I. That's what we got on the one before, and we're going to multiply that by I. This is going to equal 1. The way we get 1 from this is I can factor out this -1. So this is the same as -1 times I, and I know from I squared I is -1, so I end up with -1 times -1. So we end up with 1. We've already gotten 1 up here. I to the fifth. I to the fifth. We can say that's the same as I to the fourth, which is what we had up here, and we multiply it by I. This is going to be equal to whatever I to the fourth was. I to the fourth was 1 times I. 1 times any number is I. We also got that above. Now, I to the sixth. We can break that up and say I to the sixth is the same as I to the fifth, which is I to the fifth times I, and I to the fifth is the same as I and we get I times I. I times I, same as I squared, which is -1. Then I can separate I to the 7th, which is I to the 6th, times I. I to the 6th from above says that is -1. So we have, -1 times I is going to be -I. And look above, we had a -I up there. Can y'all see the pattern yet? The same numbers are repeating. Let's go ahead and look at I to the 8th. I to the 8th power is the same as I to the 7th times I, and that's going to equal I to the 7th, which is -I, and that's going to be multiplied by I. -I times I is going to be 1. Again, I explained that right here. Factor out the 1, -1, and I times I is -1 by definition. Separate that. So let's look at that pattern. We'll stop there and we're going to just examine the pattern. 1, I, -1, -I. 1, I, -1, -I. 1, and what do you think the next ones are going to be? We have 1, I, -1, I, 1. You are simply going to repeat those patterns as you go. So I made a little cheat sheet over here. You are going to divide by 4. There are 4 different ones we're looking at. So we're going to divide by 4 and get the remainder. For example, let's do I to the 6th power. I to the 6th power, when I divide, well, let's do it over here. When I do 6 divided by 4, I get 1, remainder 2. And I look over here at the remainder. 2, we know this is going to be -1, so that's going to be -1. So I need to, 0 is, so this is I, -1, -I, and +1. There's my options. So let's go ahead and do 64. You grab a calculator. 64. I to the 64 right here. So we're going to do I to the 64. We're going to do 64 divided by 4. Is there going to be a remainder? There's no remainder. If there's no remainder, that's simply going to be 1. Let's do I to the 73, I mean. We do 73 divided by 4, and we get 18.25. That is 1. There's a remainder of 1. 73 divided by 4 would be 18, remainder 1. So remainder 1 would be I. 19. If I divide 19, if I divide 19 by 4, and I can do that in the calculator, 19 divided by 4, I get 4.75. 16, 9 divided by 16 is 3. So 4, remainder 3. My remainder is 3. This is -I. 42. 42 divided by 4. This is going to go in there 10 times. 42, remainder 2. Remainder 2, come back up here. That's -1.